Another reason government says we need to provide a pathway to status is because Bermuda faces a decreasing working population. That means we need our long-term residents to stay in Bermuda and pay into our social safety net. Government is proposing to allow any permanent resident who has been an ordinary resident in Bermuda for 20 years to apply for Bermudian status.
The Junior Minister of Home Affairs, the Honourable Sylvan Richards, was scheduled to be with us tonight, but unfortunately had to cancel because of a family emergency. During tonight's broadcast, we are encouraging viewers to email your questions to pathwaysquestions@gov.bm. We really want to hear your views and opinions on this vitally important subject, so please send your email questions to pathwaysquestions@gov.bm. However, we do ask that you keep your questions or comments brief and devoid of personal attacks and inappropriate language. We'll now go right to the ministers and go right into the subject of pathways to status. Mr. Fay, clarify the reason why government is amending the law to provide new pathways to permanent residency and Bermuda status.
Yeah, thank you, Charles. And I think the starting point for all of this is to remember that the government had said in 2013 and 2014 that we had to spend some time looking at some of the inequities in the current Bermuda Immigration and Protection Act, starting with family connections and things like that to do with individuals who perhaps had been here for a long period of time, where some of their brothers or sisters or parents had status and they did not. So we started at that starting point. And as we started that exercise and got further into it, it started to become apparent that, of course, there's any number of other inequities that come up under current immigration law and indeed policy. We went down that road, and you'll recall as well that the government introduced the Immigration Appeal Tribunal. And out of those tribunal hearings, we have seen a number of decisions that arose that guided us towards making decisions and policy initiatives in terms of pathways to PRC and pathways to status. Of course, people that would be ultimately affected by this are people who have been in Bermuda. In the first instance, if you're looking to become a permanent resident, would have to have been in Bermuda for 15 years, free of, and been in Bermuda as ordinarily resident. If you have been in Bermuda for 20 years or more, then we are proposing that you would have the opportunity to apply for status. And it's very important for us to remember that these are, of course, people that are already in Bermuda and already working in Bermuda and had to have been ordinarily resident in Bermuda during those periods of time. Been really spending a lot of time on in the last number of weeks trying to get across to the people of Bermuda, and is that the more people that are in Bermuda, the better off Bermudians are. And what do I mean by that? Well, let's start with work permit data. In 2007, we had in issuance in Bermuda 18,000 work permits. And at that time, we had a 0 unemployment rate. As work permit numbers increase, unemployment of Bermudians decreases. And that's simply put in the way that as more people are here that are on work permits and the like, they are actually providing opportunities for Bermudians, whether that's through direct job opportunities or whether that is through servicing people that are already here. For example, the grocery stores, taxis, and the like. The short answer is, and you see this all over the world, that people that have been spending a long time in a country have brought major social benefits to those countries, whether it's through charitable organizations, time spent there, donations, and indeed working and spending money. Now, of course, this is something that's very important for Bermuda, and the reason for that is this. These people also have payroll tax. They pay payroll tax, which is a huge piece for us as a government, and that directly then pays for all of the social services that we as Bermudians rely upon. That is towards health care, that's towards education, that is towards any other number of services that government provides that we rely on. And the number of people that are here, if we want to maintain the standards that we have, we need people in Bermuda to make those payments. And that's a very simple economic reason for it. The social reasons, as I've already said, include a lot of these people have spent a lot of time in charitable organizations, and of course, again, they're also paying payroll tax in a number of other areas and employing Bermudians. So all of those kind of roll into one.
Now, Mr. Bernews, tell me what the aim of the legislation with regard to status and PRC is, and just give me just brief details on that.
Well, you want to have people they have a path to full civil rights in the country. And right now we have a situation where people don't have that. There are very limited ways of getting to full civil and political rights. And we have obligations under the European Convention. There's a right to family life. There's the International Convention on Civil and Political Rights. So there must be a path for someone to have full civil rights if we're going to call ourselves a first world country.
Given the current climate, and I'm figuring as this, with layoffs and outsourcing, redundancies, why now? Why introduce such legislation against this backdrop? I mean, isn't it like waving a red flag in front of a bull?
It can be perceived that way if you're not in receipt of the information that we're presenting, and it can certainly be perceived that way. I think we accept that. However, that is not actually the reality, and what I mean by that is this. Giving opportunities for permanent residency and status in no way make Bermudians unemployed, and in fact will lead to further employment and a better economic state for all of us. That is absolutely important. That's one of the reasons we need to do this now, to stabilize and help stabilize our economy, and indeed continue to see that people do not leave Bermuda. As we've seen, when you have mass emigration, when people leave the island, again, that means less payments into government coffers to pay for social services. That's an absolute point. So whilst some will say, well, why now, Minister? This is something that we have been working on for 3 years in terms of looking at all of the items that we believe need to be rectified. As I said, you start with one point, you end up at a point perhaps you didn't anticipate in the very beginning, and things end up being quite comprehensive reform, and that's important as well. So we say that whilst we accept and absolutely recognize that there are people in this country that are hurting, that are unemployed, we recognize that we need to continue to perhaps make some decisions that people may find not popular, but it will bear fruit in the end, and that the unemployment rate will continue to drop. And we're convinced of that, and that is why we're bringing these types of pieces of legislation.
Mr. Bernews, in layman's language, can you tell me what is the current law for anyone wishing to attain PRC or status?
Well, right now it's very, very limited, and the largest number are spouses of Bermudians. If a non-Bermudian is married to a Bermudian for 10 years and resident in the island for 7 years, then they can apply for status. But other than that, with the exception of the people who came out of the Carn and Correa decision, there's really very little path to status. There's some residual categories of people with a qualifying Bermuda connection, but they're really very small.
Can you see how Bermuda compares with other jurisdictions?
Well, what we're trying to do is to bring Bermuda in line with other jurisdictions, and we, at first we gave figures for what they do in the UK, Canada, and America, and people say, well, no, those are too big, and you need to refer to smaller places. And so we went and we looked at, all of the overseas territories, of which Bermuda is the largest, and we looked at places like Falkland and BVI, Cayman, Gibraltar, all of those sorts of places. You get Jersey and Guernsey, etc. And we really didn't match up. We were far out at the end of those. They, by and large, had a way to reach full status of between 5 and 10 years. That was the sort of average in that range. So with us putting it out with 15 and 20 years, it's still longer than a lot of those places.
Are there any statistics of people who are affected by this legislation?
How many people? Well, I think the minister has some figures.
Yeah, I don't have to.
Because most people think there are thousands and all
yeah,
that.
That's something that is a myth, quite frankly. That's an absolute myth, and it might represent good political narrative, but it's simply not the case. Let's start looking at how we know this. We have done an analysis through census data from 2010, and we've done immigration record searches and extrapolated that data. Of that, it is our view that if this legislation was to pass today, you would have about 683 people that would be able to make an application for permanent residency. In terms of status, you'd be looking at around 800 that would be able to make that application today. Now, that number is likely to be lower. I'm giving you the higher end numbers based on very conservative, looking at and being deliberately conservative in terms of how we've extrapolated the data. And when you look at the Karn and Cree decision that the Attorney General has made reference to, which was where 1,400 individuals were given the opportunity to make an application for status, of those 1,455 that we recognize would be eligible, we've seen about 700 or so applications made, and 300, just under 300 so far actually approved. What that then means is, if you even look at that data, less than 50% over a year and a half that were originally eligible have even bothered to make an application in respect of that. So if you're doing these data extrapolations, you're talking about far less than thousands of people. You're talking about a relatively small number in terms of percentage of the size of Bermuda. And let me remind everyone again, we're talking about people who are already here. They're already in jobs. They are already working. And so, again, we're not looking at people who would just come in and take an opportunity away from a Bermudian. They're here already and have been here for some time. In terms of numbers going forward, we believe, based on data that we looked at when there was a road to status number of years ago, and based on age and the like from census data, we believe it would be around about 100 per year.
Now, at the beginning of the program, we invited the viewers to send in questions, and these have just come in. And one of these questions, I appreciate that these people are already here in jobs with the right to stay. So how can they be in conferred status add any jobs to the economy?
I'm sorry, you might have to repeat the question at the end.
I appreciate that these people are already in jobs with the right to stay. So how can their being here confer status? The writing is not the way it should be.
Right.
Confer status, add any jobs to the economy. So they're already here.
Right.
So how could they add jobs to the economy?
The key here is, at the moment, these people are here on a work permit. But given that they have been here for 15, 20, 25, and some of these people have been here far longer than 20 years, they have made their lives in Bermuda. And frankly, when you have someone here that long, what you then want is you want them to start making more heavy investment in Bermuda. They're dedicated to this country. That's why they have remained. By giving them that opportunity to do so, perhaps open and own a business, buy property, and those kinds of things that they do not have the opportunity to do now, that automatically could create more jobs. Now, the other side to it is this. If these people leave, then you have lost opportunity for Bermudians, because they may be in a company where they're actually employing Bermudians, where they're responsible for the employment of Bermudians. And at the very least, should they leave, that is likely to mean, well, we know that then means less money in the payroll tax. But it also then means that that's less people buying the services, using services, buying things in our shops. The retail sector suffers as people leave. I understand the question, but I think it's slightly incorrect as a premise. I think that we've got to look at it.
And Charles, if I might add, but the Minister touched on a very important point there. You have someone on work permit who works here for a number of years and knows they're going back to their place of origin. They're going to remit all of their savings home.
Yes, right.
And then they leave and somebody else new comes and they send all their savings home. Well, you don't want that. You want them to put their savings into our economy, stimulate our economy.
All right, let's get to letter number 2. I would like to thank the current government in its admirable and compassionate considerations to the pathways of status and PRC. In my capacity as a police officer, I have seen women raised in Bermuda remaining in violent and deplorable marriage situations, as they have no status or PRC, despite being in Bermuda over 20 years. I'm not sure if that's something you can respond to.
You know, I mean, that's an individual case in terms of, I don't know from the question what other circumstances might surround it. Now, the only thing that I might be able to surmise is that the legislation does require that the spouse gives a letter of support for that non-Bermudian to obtain status. So we have seen circumstances where someone has been married to a Bermudian for 10 years. They want to make an application for status, but the legislation requires the Bermudian spouse to give a letter of support. Without that letter of support, the Immigration Department cannot process that application. Now, of course, then again, if they've been here for 15 or 20 years, later than now, they would have that opportunity to apply without the letter from the husband.
That's good to know. As the Department of Immigration is already struggling with the current workload of status, PRC, and work permit applications, with some taking in excess of 12 months to be processed, what provision is being made to account for the additional strain that we put on the department by the institution of pathways to status that will increase the number of applications for status and PRC?
Yeah, that's an excellent point. You know, Charles, the Department of Immigration is, I would say, the hardest working department that we have. They have probably the most unenviable job because I suspect no one's ever satisfied with the decision that comes out of the Department of Immigration. We started back in 2007 or thereabouts, that we had 55 staff. We now have about 33 or 34 staff. There's been obviously a hiring freeze, and over time there have been less things that the departments had to do in terms of processing different types of applications. So of course, we used to process, as I said, say 18,000 work permits. Now we do 9, but we don't have the staff. What we have managed to do, we've managed to lift the hiring freeze in respect of obtaining more staff, not just for processing, but also for compliance. And this is very important because one of the things that we have done is we have implemented a number of things over the last few years to ensure that the compliance department has the ability to fine individuals by way of civil penalties, and we've doubled criminal penalties. So whilst the applications as well for current applications have taken a year or more, there is a point here to make as well. In many jurisdictions where people are making applications for citizenship, applications, as it happens, take well in excess of a year. Obviously, we'd like to see those numbers down to give certainty to people. But patience in these circumstances is a virtue, and our staff do their best to get the job done. And I'm proud of the work that they do.
You've heard the expression, be careful what you ask for. We ask for people to write in, and
Yes.
they're coming in. So I would ask you to, when you respond, if you can be slightly more brief in your responses. Now, this one here says, this proposal will create a revolving door for many generations to come. The nanny who came here 15 years ago gets PRC and immediately decides to leave that employment and applies for a bus driver or police officer, again displacing a hard-working, look-forward-to-employment Bermudian. While the nanny position is offered to another foreigner, what do you say about this?
I disagree. That has not ever borne out in what we've seen in the past, and it certainly has not borne out in those individuals that have made applications under the Crime and Career decision. When someone comes, say, take another position, if someone comes as an accountant, they may end up moving to another position as an accountant, but it's very rare indeed for someone to say all of a sudden want to become something entirely different. What we have seen more often than not is when people, especially say spouses of Bermudians, get an opportunity for status, what happens a lot of the times, they invest in businesses, they open business, and it creates jobs. So whilst I will always accept you're going to have some that may do something like that, in the grand majority of cases, I don't believe that will happen at all, not based on what we've seen to date.
Okay, either of you can answer this. One of the requirements is that the applicant be a Commonwealth citizen. I have spent and worked for almost 28 years in Bermuda and am a U.S. citizen. How will this work for long-term American residents?
Well, I think the situation is that the person, in order to become a Bermudian, to get Bermuda status, you must be naturalized because we come under the UK government, under the British Nationality Act. So that person can apply for their for their permanent resident certificate, and then after a year, they become naturalized. Once you're free of immigration control, you then apply to be naturalized as a British subject, a Commonwealth citizen, and then you can move on from there. So that there is a path. It takes, in theory, it takes a year longer.
Now this person says, I have my PRC and have applied for status. I've been in Bermuda for 40 years. My question is, my son was born in Bermuda, 1992. He has his PRC. What is his pathway to obtaining status?
There is a provision there for children like that to also move to status, that those people will qualify for Bermudian status. And those are the sort of people who are particular hardship cases because they know no other country. Bermuda is their home, and they have no path to full rights of citizenship, which is clearly wrong.
Now, speaking of children, this is a tricky one because we've heard this one before. Are children and spouses of PRC holders allowed to seek employment?
Are children of PRC holders allowed to seek employment? If they have the permission of the minister, and if they're PRCs themselves, then yes. If they are simply here as dependents, then they would need the permission of the Minister for Immigration, and they could make an application as such for reside and seek.
Does the government know how many people, I think we've already been through it, how many people, including spouses and children, will be eligible each year over the next 15 years?
Again, it's impossible to give an absolute definitive figure, but based on the extrapolation of data, again, looking at census data and information that we have available to us, we think it's about 100 a year.
Does the number of 1455 under PRC legislation and 683 under current proposed policy include spouses and children of PRC holders who will eventually qualify for status? You're a lawyer.
Yes, there is a provision where those people will eventually qualify when they meet the requirements. But remember, all of this is on the basis that we have a hollowed-out society here. We've had a falling birth rate for decades. If you look at the fiscal responsibility report, it said how much our economy is suffering because we don't have enough people of working age. Our population is aging all the time. Our average age is getting older every year. Now, what happens is, with those, we need more people of working age, so 20 years and up. And those people, when they have health insurance, they pay into the Mutual Reinsurance Fund. The Mutual Reinsurance Fund supports HIP and future care. That's who pays for HIP and future care. And likewise, you need to pay into the social insurance pension. So all of these people pay in. People have the wrong idea that we need fewer people in Bermuda. We need more people. And I invite people to look at the fiscal responsibility report, which shows that from independent economists, not the OBA view, independent economists.
Has there been consideration and a pathway identified for BOT, that's British Overseas Territories?
Citizen, yes.
Citizens who have been naturalized and are non-PRC?
The situation there is that there are certain cases which are still before the courts. So that's been a gray area. There have been some decisions in court. I think one of the decisions is being appealed. There's another case before the courts. So, and there is a sense in which these decisions are being forced upon us, not only the Khan and Korea court case, but the more recent court cases as well.
Now this person writes, I need to know, after being married to a Bermudian and living together after 10 years, can I apply for status?
Yes.
I need to know I can apply for status.
Yes.
The answer is yes.
Yes.
Okay. Whilst I agree that it's definitely the right thing to do in granting status, PRC, to those affected, I think that just as equally, the government should be dedicated to initiatives that will create Bermudian retention. What effort is being made by government in this regard?
That's a fantastic question, because I think it feeds right into other opportunities that we're putting forward for Bermudians. Charles, that really comes down to work permit policy and the robustness of work permit policy. And whilst some quarters have heavily criticized this work permit policy that's currently there has any number of requirements in terms of giving further advertisements. We've changed job boards to show when work permits are coming up for a reapproval, and giving Bermudians the opportunity to see what kind of skill set is being asked for, so we can start to look at what we need as a skill set in terms of permits that are up and coming. One of the other things in our work permit policy is if companies have 10 or more work permits in a particular category, those companies may be asked to participate in national training plan programs, national training board programs, and that's identified in the National Training Plan Part 1, and it's also tied in with work permit policy. It is a fact that most companies want to hire qualified Bermudians, and I can say that because the process of actually getting a work permit is not an easy one. It's expensive, it's time-consuming, and it's administratively burdensome for these companies. Job Board has done a tremendous amount to identify Bermudians that are available, and we are continuing to enhance that. So I think we're on the right track. I think, obviously, we have more work to do, but we will continue in that vein to ensure that Bermudians are given the full opportunity, over and above those that are coming here to work. But again, that is separate from status and PRC in its entirety in terms of having these people remain in Bermuda in some way.
Okay. We're going to take a break right in a moment, and we'll be right back right after this.
How will Pathways to Status work? Any permanent resident who is ordinarily resident in Bermuda for 20 years will be eligible to apply for Bermudian status. All status applicants must be Commonwealth citizens and of good character. Residents of 20 years on the date of the Act will have a special transitional provision made for them. Adoptive children of resident Bermudians will be automatically given status if they were less than 12 and Commonwealth citizens when adopted.
Now, I'm sure that you in your capacity, and indeed everybody in your department, has heard many personal stories. But we have a video now that will show us some of the personal stories of some of these people who are involved in this situation.
I arrived in Bermuda over 25 years ago at the age of 7 from Jamaica. I've lived in Bermuda ever since. I have a daughter, Saraya, who was born here in Bermuda almost 2 years ago. She celebrates her birthday next month. And my husband, Raymond George, he lives here with me as well. And I'm a registered nurse at the hospital.
I'm from the Philippines, from Luzon, Angeles City. And I've been here for 25 years. I came here April 11, 1991, and I came here as a nanny.
I'm a trained pediatric dentist, but also do general dentistry as well. I employ a general dentist in my office. We have 3 hygienists and 3 assistants and a bunch of administrative staff. So we provide preventative health care, restorative care, crowns, bridges, dentures, anything you can imagine.
I'm very emotionally attached to Bermuda because it is home. After 20 years, it's actually the place I've lived the longest. My children were born here, all 3 children were born here. I started my business here. We have offices around the world, but Bermuda is our largest office, where we employ 20 people here. the great majority of our employees in Bermuda are Bermudians.
I love Bermuda. I actually can't think of any place else to live. It just has become my home. That's all there is to it. This is my home. This is where my children are, where my family is, where my business is, my colleagues. I've been here for 23 years. There is no other home at this point.
It's great. I like it. It's the same weather from the Philippines, except like December, it's a bit cold. But summer, it's the same thing back home.
I've done community services for, I think it started back when I was 7 years old and my parents moved here. My parents actually worked in the community services department up until for years and years and years and years. And so I'd often be in the feeding programs, meeting the homeless individuals, feeding them every Tuesday night before our prayer meeting service. That's age 7. And then as I grew up in the community services, I also decided to become a candy striper. So I was a candy striper for numerous years, and I was actually awarded the Teen Services Community Service Award for 2000.
When I told my children about this proposed change in legislation, I was stunned by their reaction. And I never thought they'd felt so strongly about Bermuda, and not only being the place that they were born, but they were all extremely excited with the prospect of finally officially belonging in a place where they thought they've always belonged.
I've been working, like 5 days to 6 days a week, and my spare time, like Sunday, I go to hospital helping a pink lady, and then the rest of my time, when I have time, I help the Girl Guide for all the stuff for the Girl Guide, because I have the skills as a seamstress, so I help them too.
My daughter was born, she was born stateless. And unfortunately, I had to wait for almost 18 months to have her naturalized before I could take her out of the island. So we were essentially stuck in Bermuda for 18 months. And my daughter was ill, actually. She had very, very bad case of eczema. And we had to wait till we got all the paperwork and everything sorted out before we could actually take her overseas.
Although my son has recently become PRC, he's 18 years old now, last summer he only stayed 2 weeks because he couldn't work here, and he was like, look, I love this place, but I'm not a beach bum, I'm not going to hang out on the beach for a month and a half, and he eventually left after 2 weeks to find a job in the U.S.
I actually need a residence to own and live in at this point. Without that, then I have no security. I'd unfortunately have to go back to the United States and kind of build my life again from there. However, my children, who I already said will most definitely live in Bermuda, would definitely, it would tear our families apart. It most definitely would. So yeah, getting status would mean me being able to retire in Bermuda and to be with my family.
The minute your children lose interest in the country that they feel emotionally attached to, well, naturally, you will eventually lose interest yourself. And so I don't want that to happen to Bermuda. We want family to belong. We want family to be here and feel welcome, right? And as much as the executive may be secure in their jobs, right, you have to think of their spouses, you have to think of their children, and to the extent that we lose that family unit and we make them feel like, yes, you're here, we love your economic contribution, we love your social contribution, but you know what, even after 15, 20 years, you're not part of our society, right? And at some point, people want to feel, and like I say all the time, so people want to feel appreciated and wanted.
I've had many instances, even not at work, but on the street, where I often find individuals who have collapsed, fainted, feel sick, being able to interact with them and being able to share with them. And they always end the statement, "It's nice to see a Bermudian nurse." And then I often have to say to them, "I'm actually not Bermudian." And they look at me, "You sound Bermudian. You're not Bermudian? Aren't you related to the?" And then I have to say, "No, I'm not Bermudian. Those are my adoptive families." But, you know, I am a nurse, and I have lived here for a amount of years. So it's sort of strange again, almost every day. I have to explain to people that I'm not Bermudian.
You know, I've been talking to few of the executives that have recently left the island and who had tangible job impact on the Bermuda economy. And one of the things that I was asking them as a scenario, I said, look, if the government had come to you and say, welcome to Bermuda, to you, your family, here's your PRC, or here's your citizenship, we want you to stay here, you're an important part of our community, would you have stayed, was my question to them. And I was surprised because all those that I asked the question said yes, we would have stayed. I would say of all the friends that I've surveyed, I'm going to guess a number. I would say probably 200 to 300 jobs have left with them, which is pretty significant for a small community like ourselves. And the worst of it all, what pains me is that we had them, right? We had them, and all we had to do was to make sure that we kept them.
I'm not here to take somebody's job. And I didn't come here to take somebody's job when I arrived. I didn't have this set agenda that I was going to marry some Bermudian and then get status and, you know, take the world by storm. It wasn't the case. I got married because I was in love with the man I married. I had children because I really wanted to have children. And I wound up in this country, of all countries. I would have never imagined winding up in Bermuda, but I did.
It's very unfair if I don't have any status by now, because I've been here for 25 years.
I should be given status because I've produced 2 beautiful Bermudian children, which I've single-handedly raised on my own, because I have employed numerous Bermudians over the years. I employ 5 Bermudians in my office at this point in time, because I gave 6 years of my time to the health department working there, helping to support the community, and because I provide really good health care.
We need to bring back that community together and feel that together we will make a stronger Bermuda.
You know, I love Bermuda. I will, if I do have to leave Bermuda someday, I will have to say goodbye to Bermuda, but essentially I think this is my home. I have other family members here that live in the country, and I really think it would be such an awesome opportunity to finally call my home my home.
No, I'm sure that there are many more testimonials, and I'm sure in your various offices you see a lot of them. I think one of the things that comes to mind when I look at these people are they're really no threat to the young Bermudian executive who's looking for a job. How do you give them some comfort?
I had a call just this week from a young man who came here in August of 1989, and the cutoff was the 31st of July of 1989. So his whole life has been here in Bermuda, and he's saying, well, you know, where is there for me? So the stories that the viewers have seen on the screen, there are many, many more stories, and quite often those people are people that everyone thinks are Bermudian. They've lived their whole lives here, that they're in our community, they're the friends of all the Bermudians.
You know, Charles, not one of those testimonies had anyone, I don't think anyone could think that someone came to Bermuda with the intent when they arrived to be here for as long as they ended up being here. They continued to work here because they were needed in this community, and there are any number of other stories like that. And you know, we see these every week at the Department of Immigration. I deal with appeals every Thursday, and part of the unfortunate part of the job is to say no to people. and you look at some of the human stories and you say, I would love to be able to help someone out that's been here for 25, 26, 27 years and has made enormous and valuable contributions to Bermuda, but and we have to say no, because the legislation does not allow us to do it. And, you know, let's face it, no one in this government or anyone in Bermuda would want to do something that would be detrimental to Bermuda. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. These stories just simply put a human face and an experience to what some just say, well, it's just writing on a piece of paper, and you don't really grasp what those stories are. So some have criticized and said, well, this is just tugging at people's heartstrings. No, this is the reality of the community that we live in. And we, in Bermuda, we pride ourselves in being warm, welcoming, loving people. That is the reputation that we as Bermudians have. And to dismiss these stories and just to dismiss them out of hand is just simply not reflective of who we are as Bermudians. Again, we're talking about hundreds and hundreds, not thousands and thousands of people. You know, I have to say, Charles, dare anyone to look any one of those individuals in the face and say, we don't want you here, especially when you see what they've made a contribution to this country. No one deserves anything, but it's the right thing to do. And I think that is where our position is. And we may differ from others, but it is the right thing to do.
Now, there is a school of thought out there that some, and get back to young executives, will apply for a position, and they all already know by the amount of applications they've sent in, and they see an advertisement, whether this is a job that they're not going to get because it's held by somebody who has status or not yet have status. Can you convince them that these applications are really monitored and that is not the case, where they cannot be identified, but we're not getting there because that's already...
Yeah, no, absolutely. You know, there's a Department of Immigration with technical officers that review every work permit application and make recommendations to the Immigration Board that makes determinations as to whether or not a work permit should be granted. There is a right of appeal to the minister. And no matter what anyone says, I know how many appeals come in, and I know how many we say no to. And it is not an insignificant number. We are very aware that there are some employers that wish to tailor ads for a specific individual. And we do our best to make sure that that does not happen. I know that there's stories out there. It's going to happen, Charles, but on the grand scheme of things, it's not just in the Bermudians' interest to see Bermudians employed, it's also the government's interest to see Bermudians employed. So we would never introduce a policy that would go against something like that would harm Bermuda and the government itself. It simply doesn't make sense. I am confident that the job is being done in the best possible way. I accept that some errors can be made, and I know that there's stories out there where things go wrong. But we do the best job that we can to protect Bermudians' interests and at the same time grow this economy.
All right, let's go back to our promise of letting the people who send in information. But before that, let's take a break, and then when we come back, we'll go back to these letters, the emails that came in. So we'll take a break for now.
How will pathways to permanent residency work? Any person who is ordinarily resident in Bermuda for 15 years will be eligible to apply for permanent residency. All applicants must be of good character and resident in Bermuda for 2 years prior to applying. Anyone born in Bermuda or who is under 16 on their arrival in Bermuda will be eligible if they have 10 years residency upon their 18th birthday. Any person who has a Bermuda immediate family connection will be eligible for permanent residency after 10 years of ordinary residency in Bermuda and upon reaching their 18th birthday.
welcome back to this live discussion on pathways to status. We're talking to the Minister of Home Affairs, Senator the Honorable Michael Fay, and the Attorney General, Trevor Munnis. As we said earlier, we invited people to send in comments, and they're coming in fast and furious.
That's good.
So we can go through these as quickly as we can, while also give them satisfaction. I was under the understanding that work permits had restrictions, and an individual could not apply for PRC nor status via time spent in Bermuda on a work permit. Would you clarify this?
Yeah, sure. You will recall that when this government took over, we put in place a declaration when people made an application for a work permit. And that declaration was essentially done that says if you have no expectation of obtaining long-term residence just because you get a work permit. We had to end the ability for what's basically termed, and the AG can expand on it, legitimate expectation of something. That still gets done, because what we do not want is someone to say after 4 or 5 years, given what we see in other jurisdictions, that AG has talked about other very small jurisdictions where you can in fact get PRC or status in less than 10 years. We don't want to be in that position. And people sign a declaration to say they have no legitimate expectation. If the government of the day decides that it's something that they wish to give, then that's for the government of the day to make that decision. But the declaration is to end legitimate expectation of getting something.
And this person goes on to say, why not have a cap or quota?
One of the things, Charles, is that, and it's misinformation, there is not any jurisdiction that we've been able to identify where you put a quota on giving citizenship to people who fulfill the requirements, in other words, have been in a jurisdiction for a long period of time. If you've been in that jurisdiction for a long period of time, and that's the rule, they don't put quotas. Quotas often come into play when you're looking at bringing in economic migrants, much as like a green card program in the United States, where they will say, we're looking for X number of thousands of people in a particular category, and the quota is 20,000, 30,000, 40,000 people. In terms of people who have been in a jurisdiction for a significant period of time, we have not been able to identify a jurisdiction that has a quota.
Now, you use the word green card. This person wants to know, did the government consider the route of a green card paper or on immigration? If not, why not?
Green paper on immigration, you're saying?
Green paper, yeah.
Green paper on immigration. You know, we're the government. We have a mandate to govern the country. We have looked at the issue. I think there's agreement here, there's bipartisan support that there needs to be immigration reform. We really don't have at this point the luxury of going, you know, normally you have a green paper which takes a year or 2 years, then you have a white paper which takes another year or 2 years. So 5 years down the road, you get my drift, it won't get the job done. But the government have a lot of pressure on it to get results, to get economic results, and to get them quickly. And so we don't have the luxury of time.
Now let's segue into this one. Understanding the complexity that comes with immigration, the effect it has not only on financial stability, but the social impact from the viewpoint of the Bermudian. This is one. Did the government ask the society before coming to a conclusion?
Yeah, that's a very fair question. We put in our throne speech, 2013 and 2014, about our intent to make immigration reform on certain circumstances. In terms of wider community consultation, there have been any number of polls since 2000 about the community's thoughts on giving people long-term residence or status. It started back in 2000 with about 50% in support, and some of the most recent polls have upwards of 70% in support of giving people some form of permanency in our jurisdiction. You know, I think again the Attorney General has made it very clear indeed that given what we believe, that the more people you have in this country, the better off we as Bermudians are. There is an urgency to get certain things accomplished in a relatively short space of time. And at the same time, let's not forget this, fulfilling some of the issues that we have faced in respect of human rights and some of the Immigration Appeal Tribunal cases which have put us in a very sticky predicament.
Now, the producers give me signals to move faster. And this was a question actually I had for you, but I'll give over to this individual. Why did not the government sit down with the PRP and work out some kind of immigration policy together?
I appreciate the question. I certainly have, as Minister of Home Affairs, had any number of conversations with some of my opposition counterparts. And their position has been made very clear indeed to me, and no doubt some of my other colleagues. The PLP's position, or the opposition's position, has been that there should be no offering of status until Bermuda becomes independent. We cannot start at that starting point. The opposition has said they do not wish to collaborate. That's what they've said in the past in relation to this issue, and that status is a red line in the sand. When people are taking such a hard-line position, it's very difficult to have some of those conversations. What we do know is that the opposition has called for comprehensive immigration reform. This is comprehensive immigration reform. The opposition has asked for the opportunities for families to be enjoined and end some of the issues that we've seen. This does that. So I think a lot of these, if people, I hope, spend the time to look at what we're proposing, I would hope that we're not that far off as a country as a whole.
Now, this question strikes to the heart of many Bermudians. There are many long-term foreigners in the hospitality industry, particularly in our food establishments, as a result of continuous renewal of work permits. Why hasn't either government stopped this a long time ago and put programs in place to train Bermudians to do these jobs that have been held for decades by foreigners?
Charles, that's something that, I think we as Bermudians do get sometimes frustrated when we go to our local hotels, and it doesn't appear to be many Bermudians on the front line. We know that we need huge numbers of chefs. We know that we need more people to be in the service industry, and that's been one of the government's primary focuses, has been the hospitality industry and encouraging Bermudians to get involved in the hospitality industry. Hotels want to hire Bermudians. They hold job fairs. We've done that with the Department of Workforce Development, and in fairness, so did the opposition. When they were in power, they hosted job fairs with the hotels and get Bermudians employed. What we need to do is refocus as Bermudians on that service industry. A lot of the time, unfortunately, what we hear, and it's just the way things have gone, Bermudians will go into the hospitality industry, but then you have a double-edged sword. They'll make more money in the construction industry. And so when the construction industry takes off, a lot of the Bermudians leave hospitality and go into construction. They've lost a career, long-term career opportunity, because when that project ends, perhaps that job is now filled by someone else. But because they're on work permits, there is an opportunity for Bermudians to reapply. I do not believe that these things are just absolutely renewed, and I know they are not based on what I see as data through the department.
This verse says, I'm a 24-year-old person born to foreign parents. I was born here and lived here all my life. Would I qualify for status under the new status reform laws?
Well, that's a bit of too specific a question, but it sounds like quite likely that person might qualify in the first instance for PRC, but you'd need to know all the details.
Some of the new people obtaining status have children currently living overseas. These children were forced to leave the island to work after university, as they could not work here. They would have spent many years growing up here but have no status. Would they have any chance of returning to live and rejoin their families from whom they have been isolated? What are their prospects?
Again, that's going to come down to the age of those individuals and the like. Some people will have now fallen through the huge crack, and some of these people we will not be able to help from their past, but going forward we would be able to assist on a pathways to status.
This person, I think we may have had this before. I've been here for 23 years and studied here my entire life. Almost had to leave the island, leaving my family behind until I got a work permit. My question is, why is it taking so long to give status? This will give us a secure future to invest in Bermuda and to start a family. So many benefits will come with status given.
Well, I mean, I think
we agree with that. We agree with that.
He's answering.
That's a nice, easy answer. Yes.
How much will it be to apply for PRC and Bermuda status? That's the one. Two, if a child of a PRC holder is unable to apply for PRC, but they were born in Bermuda in 1995, how will they be able to become a Commonwealth citizen or naturalized if they do not have belonger status?
With those, they're too specific. That I would, welcome someone like that to approach me directly, and we can give them some guidance.
In many countries, the pathway to citizenship includes a test about the country's history, involvement in community and investment, other than paying taxes. So why isn't this part of our pathway to status?
Some jurisdictions, when you're looking to come to a country, have a point system, and that point system may ask questions about how much money you're bringing to the country, education level, what jobs you're bringing. We don't think that's appropriate here, because again, we're talking about people who have been here for 15 and 20 years or more. And so a lot of the times questions are asked in other jurisdictions. If you're making a citizenship application after 3 years, you're going to be asked all these questions to make sure that you know what you're doing. If someone's been here 15 or 20 years, in my view, they know what Bermuda is, and we've heard testimonies from people who have been here that make major contributions to this community.
If these proposals are put in place and the number of persons gaining status increased by 100 on a yearly basis, what do you envision as the maximum ideal population for Bermuda? Have you considered a number?
Charles, we, as the Attorney General has already said, we are not having enough births in Bermuda. We are dying faster than we're being born. The ideal population rate to replace ourselves is 2.1. We're something like 0.88. We're simply not, or maybe it's slightly more, but it's certainly under 1. We are well beneath the point where that we would be having too many people. At our height in 2007, let's remember this, there were 18,000 permits in circulation. We now have 9,500 permits in circulation. That's 9,000 less permits than we had almost 10 years ago. We're well beneath any type of level of so-called insustainability.
Now, some of these emails are repetition of the others, so we've already heard them, so I'll skip over this. This one here, I have 2 questions for tonight. What are the projections for how many people will qualify for status over the next 10 to 15 years? That's 1. 2, of the approximate 760 current PRC applications, why have only approximately half been granted? Have they been denied, or is there a backlog?
There is a significant backlog. As we said earlier, we have had the inability to process simply because of a lack of staff, not because of the lack of effort on behalf of my department, and that's the way that goes. I think we've answered the question in respect of what we see as year on year and those projections based on what the numbers are from the last census.
I think actually we've run out of the latter so far because I said some of them were duplicates. It was pointless answer. But Attorney General, let me go back to this case of in the courts of Khan and Korea. Can you explain briefly what that was all about?
Yeah, those involved individuals who had spent a long time in Bermuda, those particular 2 individuals. And I believe they were here before that magic cutoff date, which was the 31st of July, 1989, and they had become naturalized. And the Chief Justice in his decision decided that they were entitled to the full rights of citizenship, and that's the basis upon which those people were entitled to Bermuda status.
Now,
that's a Supreme Court judgment. It can be found online if one cares to look it up, because the Judicial Department have a website, and all those decisions are up there.
I said we're running out, more bills coming in. Okay, and this I think we've already answered. And I think you answered, why have not a point system like Cayman Islands? You've answered that earlier, didn't I answer that?
Yeah, indeed. Again, there's point systems in jurisdictions when you're trying to attract a certain type of immigrant, and you're looking to say, for example, if you need a certain number of accountants, you need a certain amount of investment, you'll get points allocated for that investment that you make, and it is not normally, it is not based on you already being there. It's based on you coming there for the first time as economic migrants or things that the local government requires you to have before you enter the country, and you get a certain number of points based on that. Again, we're talking about people who have been here for 20 or more years for status. Charles, it's a lifetime.
This is directed to you, Attorney General. The Attorney General just said that PRC students will have the same rights as ordinarily Bermudian student children. Does that mean they can apply for summer employment as well? Did we go to this?
No,
this is
the
different.
person's sort of misunderstanding, I think, is that there was a person who'd been here a long time, and we said that they would probably be qualified for PRC. The PRC would then lead to full status. The minister could speak directly to who's permitted summer employment.
As a general concept, no. If someone is here as the child of a work permit holder, then no, they're not entitled to summer employment. That's a work permit policy question, not something to do, in my view, with PRC and status.
Now, you may like to take a bow on this. This person says, Minister Fay, I really appreciate getting a clear explanation on pathways to status without all the noise and chatter of other people's opinion. Now I understand the proposal. Thank you.
Oh, it's nice to be complimented.
Let's be thanked. This person says, if a person obtains his or her PR status through this new process and has children living in another country under the age of 16 and brings them to Bermuda, is it correct to say that these children will be able to obtain PR status after 10 years of residency in Bermuda? Is this correct?
We're still looking at the proposed legislation, but the intention is to have a provision for children who come here before a certain age and after they've been here a certain period of time, so that there is a path that's intended to be.
What if these people all start claiming financial assistance as soon as they get status?
Well, I mean, what if? We can come up with what ifs all right, but that is, in my view, beyond the realm of possibility. They're here now, they're working, and they're self-sustaining. Remember, you can't be on a work permit and be claiming financial assistance. So they're not just, I don't know anybody that would do something like that. I don't think that's not possible.
Why are there so many qualified Bermudians unemployed at a time when you're stating that we need immigrants to fill the drastic vacancies?
We're not talking about, in terms of PRC and status immigrants, we're talking about people who have been here in Bermuda fulfilling their duty as someone working and living in Bermuda. Again, the statistics are very, very clear. The more people that are in Bermuda, the more jobs there are for Bermudians. And I'm just going to make the point again. At the height of Bermuda's economic success in terms of turnover and the like, there were 18,000 work permit holders in circulation and almost a zero unemployment rate. The two are correlated, and most countries accept that. When you have people that are here as proper economic migrants, or indeed people who have made a serious contribution over that period of time, it results in opportunities for the local population, and Bermuda is not excluded from that. It is an absolute.
This one is a lot more personal. I have a parent who is on annual residency permit with no application for work for the last 8 years. They contribute and volunteer each week and love the island. They're saying it in singular. Will my parent be eligible for Bermuda status under the proposed immigration reform?
Again, it's a little bit specific.
Yeah, it's a
and
bit
I'm not
too
sure that we
technical
can.
a question. We haven't released the legislation yet, so stay tuned.
Yeah.
Now, these are some, I'm sure there are many more emails. In fact, I had received some at home, which I didn't get to bring. But, there's a lot of opinions out there, you know. Now, there is one opinion where I saw this in the Royal Gazette. Curb, like, for example, in a recent opinion column, alleged that the OBA is doing nothing more, this is Curb words, not mine, than whitening the electorate. And do you have a response to that?
Absolutely. The answer to that is complete and utterly nonsense. And I have said this on any number of occasions. It is sad indeed that anyone would make that kind of allegation without not even an ounce of a shred of evidence of that. We do not take data when people are making applications and ask what race they are. Now, we've done our extrapolation from the census, and I can tell you the number is not 70 and 80%. It's well less than that in terms of numbers of white people. And I guess one of the questions that I've often asked when Curb says that, is their opinion different? Would they accept immigration reform if all of the applicants were black? I don't care if someone is green, purple, black, or white. If they have fulfilled a duty in Bermuda, they have been here for 20 years, that shouldn't be on our agenda. I don't care which way they vote. I don't presume to know which way they vote. And I can tell you in all of those individuals' testimonies, that question has never been asked and has never come up. It does not bother me which way they vote. Not my problem.
So you can put to bed this assertion that the OBA is really doing this to get votes.
Well, I can try as best
You may
I
not be
can,
successful.
but I may not be successful. But I think it doesn't make sense for us to even
But
be
you do
doing
hear
it.
this frequently.
Well, not frequently. I hear it from a minority of individuals.
Okay.
But the bedrock issue is, we've been elected to stimulate the economy. And all of the steps we're taking, whether it be the America's Cup or whether it's immigration reform, is linked. This one here, it's the right thing to do. We have international legal obligations, so the two things segue together. But ultimately, we're trying to create jobs and stimulate this economy, and we're succeeding.
Back to you again. It's been said that because you're currently in the Senate, the question is, do you harbor aspirations for elected office?
Oh, I would eventually hope to run in an election, but I'm not sure what that's got to do with status of PRC.
That's what they want to get you. There's a school of thought out there that suggests that the government, the government's focus is more on the advancement of the expatriate worker than the Bermudian. Would you respond to that?
I think the Attorney General really tried to lay out why immigration and why people that are here already, it's important to keep them here for the success of all Bermudians. As I said, economic data says that, independent economists have said that, and I think even the opposition has to accept that more people in Bermuda actually does mean more jobs for Bermudians. Now, if people are stuck on a mindset that everybody that's here is taking a job from Bermudian, then how did these people come here in the first place? And let's remember something else. A lot of the time where people have come as guest workers, let's also remember it's Bermudians that are employing them, and in their own business that are employing these people. Those Bermudians are benefiting themselves from hiring other people, whether they're guest workers or not. So no, I don't. I think that the government has found itself in a very unfortunate position that when we took government, this economy was in free fall, and people had just about run out of patience by the time we took office at the state of this economic, at the state of our economy in Bermuda. So people's patience has worn thin. People want to say jobs will turn around just like that. All of us want that. If I could wave a magic wand and everyone have full unemployment again, I'd be the most thrilled minister in this government. We are trying our best, and as best we can, and we will get there, Charles.
And on that note, we'll take a break.
What are the benefits of the Pathways to Status initiative? Bermuda's economy will be improved by a larger working population. Funds for social services will also increase. Bermuda will come into compliance with international human rights laws and standards. Our friends and neighbors will not have to feel like second-class citizens.
We're back, and we're talking about pathways to status to the Minister of Home Affairs, the Honorable Michael Fay, and the Attorney General, the Honorable Trevor Munnis. More mail.
Good, that's good.
This one says, given the British government is going to do a referendum regarding citizenship with the European Union, shouldn't we, Bermuda, follow suit to referendum as well?
The reasons for the British government doing a referendum respective remaining within the European Union have many issues far and above whatever immigration issues they have. That's been an issue in the UK for the day they entered the European Union. So I'm not sure it's a fair comparison. What the Attorney General has made clear is, again, the government has been elected to govern. And the government of the day sometimes has to take decisions that are not immediately popular. Charles, a lot of the time in the community, people have said, well, immigration is a third rail of politics. In other words, people don't want to touch it with a barge pole. And you can see why when people that feel disenfranchised for many other reasons, other than perhaps immigration-related reasons, that will march and they will say things that are not so pleasant. Sometimes you have to take, as a government, a leadership position and say, and make it known what we believe is the right thing to do, not just for the individuals that have been here for the amount of time that they're here, but more to the point, what is in the best interest of this country as a whole. And again, no government is going to do something that they believe is simply going to see them thrown out of office. The things that we're putting in place here will bear fruit, and I think that you will see that, and what we've done so far, as the Minister of Finance has said in our premier, is we stabilize this economy, and we will continue to put in policies like immigration reform that will see more sustained economic growth.
Will someone who has been here on an annual residency permit with no application for work be eligible for status under the proposed reform?
No.
That's a quick answer. Another one says, I've heard that the fee to get Bermuda status will be $25,000. Is this true? What is the cost going to be for PRC and status?
The short answer to the first question is no. I know where the figure has come from. The figure has come from those in respect of the fee that is required to be paid for individuals who are making an application for permanent residency under the Job Makers Act. That is a $25,000 fee, but that will not be applicable for those that are making an application for status as a respect of being here for 20 or more years. We're still working on the fee structure, but it will not be anywhere near that amount.
I think you may have answered it already, but will there be a limit on the amount of people who can apply for status?
It will be limited in respect of them ensuring that the obligations are fulfilled in respect of the Act. So if people fulfill the obligations under the Act, they're able to make that application. Charles, something I can add to that so that people understand it's not just you make an application and you get it. Forever in Immigration Protection Act, when people are making applications for, in the past, PRCs and status and the like, they have to fulfill certain requirements. That's an ordinarily resident requirement, is making sure you've been in the jurisdiction a certain period of time prior to application, making sure that that person is of good character and conduct. Bermudians have to give references to those individuals to say they are of good character and conduct. Those names, and as well, they have to be free of criminal convictions that in the minister's view are free of moral turpitude, and we will be giving guidance notes that have never been given, in Bermuda when those types of things have been in place. And remember that people who make applications for status, as currently is the case for the Carnan Career decision, those names will be advertised in the newspaper so that people are able to say, no, that person is not eligible because they haven't been ordinarily resident. So, we believe that there will be sufficient checks and balances, as there have always been, before people have that application approved. The second piece of that, which no one has asked yet, but I'm happy to just mention it, is that in the event that someone obtains status, and it turns out that they've done it by way of fraudulent means or failure to disclose certain facts that the minister should have been aware of, then that status can be revoked. And that's important to this. And so, there are things that people have to do properly, and there are checks and balances. It's not just apply and you're automatic. There's checks and balances in place to make sure that the right thing is done for the protection of Bermuda.
But the bottom line, though, going back, our analysis at this point in time does not show that there would be any need for some sort of a cap on the numbers or anything of that sort.
So this person's been watching because they said earlier you stated that those persons who are currently here, such as accountants, will not be applying for industrial jobs such as bus drivers. That is a moot point, as many foreigners currently working in low-paying jobs would be eligible to compete with Bermudians for such jobs. What is being done to protect jobs for Bermudians?
I think people tend to get concerns that they may have with current work permit policy confused with those individuals who have already been here for 20 years. yes, those individuals on a work permit. Again, the way in which you prevent individuals from simply taking a Bermudian job is to make sure you have a robust work permit policy. And I believe that we have a robust immigration policy. I need to remind the person who did ask the question is that it is this government that put in place civil penalties, $5,000, $10,000 on a first and second offense for breach of immigration law and policy. We also doubled criminal penalties in respect of breaches of immigration law and policy and a criminal activity. We have also put in place various training mechanisms to the National Training Board and Job Board to give opportunities for Bermudians in respect of work permit policy. There is frustration, Charles, but you know what? Part of the issue that we have is a large number of people that were here successively renewed because of failures in past immigration policy. And that is a fact, and unfortunately, we are having to deal with that.
Charles, I just address the point of one of the important points here. We're doing the economic debate tomorrow in the House of Assembly. All of this is about business confidence. We're trying to stimulate the economy. You heard the gentleman on the video talking about people who left and took jobs for Bermudians with them. We want people to stay here. We want this economy to boom. We are turning around business confidence. We're achieving success. So people have to look at it in a positive way rather than trying to view it as something, crabs in a bucket is the expression. We don't want to be crabs in a bucket. We have to make a bigger pie.
Now, this person has written to me, say, "Hi, Charles. Hi. It seems to me that the bottom line is that Bermuda's educational system and career training schemes do not appear to produce many Bermudians who are equipped to replace jobs currently held by non-Bermudians. Is this something the minister is prepared to address?"
This government is prepared to address it and has been. And again, we put out National Training Plan Part 1, and I'm pleased to say that whilst National Training Plan Part 2 has taken a long time to produce, it is almost near completion to give further guidance to Bermudians looking for work. Now, the education system in Bermuda has not been anywhere near the levels, in my view, that it should be. But there is a Minister of Education, Minister Wayne Scott, who is working diligently to help ensure that we can have a better future for all Bermudians in education. But there has been a problem. We have not been equipped as Bermudians to sometimes fulfill all of the roles at a highly technical level. And again, that is why at times we have had to continue to have work permits reapproved over a period of time in some of these highly specialized areas. And sometimes that's the unfortunate reality of what we're dealing with. It's a long-term underlying systemic problem that will take a long time to fix. And this is not just a problem of this government, it's been a problem of previous governments.
What is being done for persons that have made applications for status that are children born in Bermuda or outside Bermuda? This seems familiar. Is there a pathway for that? Is there still the residency requirement?
There is a residency requirement. It's a short answer.
Short answer.
I'll do the short answer.
Right. Now, this person has sent you a plaudit, and they say, "Continue to do what's right for Bermuda and most importantly for its people. I appreciate your knowledgeable and professional manner of dialogue. Continue the good work." You have a fan of this over here. Now, this person asks, will we get a residence card for status similar to the United States?
The Department of Immigration has been putting out proper work permit cards since the middle of last year. The intent is to, over time, start issuing cards for dependents and others so that if you are coming into Bermuda, you have a card. But if you are a status holder, you get a stamp in your passport to say that you are a status holder. So you would not necessarily, I don't think, need a card.
When will the legislation be tabled, and on the basis of normal parliamentary procedure, when will it come into effect? When do you plan to implement these laws? Mr. Lawyer.
Well, we are hopeful once we finalize the legislation of getting it tabled in the House of Assembly this session, and we will take it from there to see when an appropriate time to debate it. But obviously, the minister wants to move it forward as quickly as possible.
In terms, Charles, what I can say is that there will be a commencement date provision in the legislation, because should we be fortunate to pass the legislation this session, then we need to get the Department of Immigration to a position to be able to accept applications. You've seen we've had a backlog before. We need to make sure that we have the policies, the procedures, the right forms in place, all of those technical aspects that come in behind. So should it pass, we would not be implementing this immediately. It will take a number of months for us to get our department and staff to a position to accept applications.
This person said, I was born here in 1981, raised here, left at the age of 11, then came back at the age of 21 under a work permit. The question is, would I be able to apply for permanent residence or status?
No.
Well, in due course, you know, it's a matter of due course the person looks at it, but not, they've been away, so that period that they were here before.
They lose that time?
Yes, that's too long a period,
Okay.
yes.
This one you answered vehemently, but I'm going to ask you again since
Okay.
they're right again.
Yes.
Do you have a racial breakdown, or from which parts of the world would most of these applicants originate?
Again, I don't think that makes any difference whatsoever as to where they're from. And it's dangerous indeed to lead us down a path where people continue to make this an issue of race, because it has simply, in my view, no bearing whatsoever in terms of the decisions that need to be made for the benefit of Bermuda. It just has no place. Again, these people have been here for 20 years, and I am not going to say or ask my colleagues or expect the government in any way to start making decisions based on the color of someone's skin when they're making decisions that are in the benefit of the country.
Some status applications have been in for a year and a half. This person knows of one who is a PRC holder and lived in Bermuda for 48 years. Will these be approved before other applicants are actually received? 48 years?
There are individual cases where it's amazing how long some people have been here. It may be that they missed that person probably would have obtained a PRC or status in another area of the legislation, but missed a cutoff date. But in short, yes, we will make sure that some people are processed that have already made those applications. And that's one of the reasons we would have a commencement provision to put off the date of commencement of the new act so we can clear the things that are already in progress.
Now, we have had quite a number of emails come in, and I think people have responded quite well to these requests that we made in the future. Given the climate, do you see any opportunity for sort of a calming of the wave, so to speak, where people can now, if you have these types of forums on a frequent basis, where people can understand what you're trying to do? Because I honestly think town hall meetings tend to attract different kinds of people.
This is a great forum. It's a real opportunity for people, I think, to hear the government's position on these matters. People have been fantastic in putting in requests for answers. We will make a determination going forward. I will say this, that when we had our town hall last week, when we talk about a climate, the vast majority of individuals that attended that first town hall meeting stayed seated, were quiet, and genuinely wanted to hear what the government had to say. I will not presuppose that they supported or were against what the proposals were, but they came to listen. And if people genuinely want to listen, we will share information as much as people want to hear it. As the AG said, we can talk about this all day and all night. We can have short, long questions, but there's nothing that we need to hide here. But if someone just wants to say no, some people we can't reach, Charles. And we will do our best to get the information out there. If people want it, no one will be able to say to us that they didn't have information available to make an informed decision. Once they've had an opportunity to review that information, it's in that individual's right, of course, to make the determination. But let's base it on fact. not on myths.
Well, and Charles, one of the things that really concerns me is the effort by a very small group of people to stifle debate, to shout over everyone else and to say, we don't want a public discussion on this, we only want our point of view to be put across. And they're a very small minority, so we would hope that they would stop that behavior. Most Bermudians don't approve of it.
Well, we've made an effort here tonight to reach as many people as possible, and I have to thank you both for coming to the studio and sharing your views for the viewers to hear you say it outright. And we ought to also thank the people who sent in their emails, because they've actually come up with some very interesting questions.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you, Charles.
Well, for the past, I guess, hour and a half, you've been watching Pathways to Status, coming to you live from the studios of CITV here in Spanish Point. This time we should thank the staff of CITV and Government Information Services and the Ministry of Immigration and, of course, the Attorney General's Chambers for all the work they put into getting this information out to the public. I'm sure with the other forums in the future, and if so, we invite you to keep your ears peeled for them. So on behalf of all of us who've been here this evening bringing this information, I'm Charles Bell. Wish you a very pleasant evening, and thank you for joining us.
CITV Channel 2.